It is so remarkable to hear the words of former Israeli Prime Minister Golda Meir in 1970, where she's interviewed about Israel and the Middle East conflict. And this is in 1970, and yet so many of her words ring so true today. Have a watch of this short clip.
This is something that must be realized by people in the world, and unless they realize that, there is no understanding of the entire situation. Our quarrel with the Arabs is not a quarrel for a piece of land. It's not for territory. It's not for anything concrete. They just refuse to believe that we have the right to exist at all.
Oh, what's changed?
But surely for the people who were here in 48, who have left then, surely for the Jordanians who are now on the other side of the Jordan, surely for them it's land. And don't you understand them and their desire to come back?
Why did they leave?
Well, many of them were refugees of war. Maybe they don't like a conquered
But
army.
who made the war? They don't like a conquered army. Therefore, we should leave. Oh, that I understand. Yes, then we can have peace in this area.
But
Without Israel, in this area, there won't be peace. The Arabs are not so friendly with each other, but that's none of my business. Oh, this is a solution.
But I have a feeling
It just happens that there are 14 Arab countries and immense territories. And we've come back. We've been here before.
2,000 years
And
ago.
we've come back.
2,000 years ago.
Yes.
Oh, this is just so epic. Such a great clip of Golda Meir, and I think we should watch more of this clip because there's a lot more in this that's really important words. But it is just so shocking how naive and gullible people are in the West to the blatant lies used by the anti-Israel side. He keeps talking about what happened in 1948. None of the displacement that happened, that they lament about, the Arab displacement, none of it would have happened had they said, okay, the United Nations have proposed that we're going to split the land because there's Jews here, there's Arabs here. There hasn't been any big displacements. People are just living here. A lot of the population actually grew in the 19th century when you started to have, there's always a small presence of Jews and Arabs, but then in the 19th century you had greater influx and waves of Jews returning after 2,000 years to their land, and also Arabs, as a result of seeing Jews coming back and the land starting to flourish a bit more and more opportunity coming, they migrated to the land as well. And there's no big displacements happening. But then in 1948, after the United Nations proposed partitioning the land, creating a Jewish state and an Arab state, again, no displacement has occurred. The Jews say, yeah, sure. And the Arabs say, absolutely not. And then he says, but this was 2,000 years ago the Jews were there. I'm sorry. Just because we have faced 2,000 years of forced exile and displacement doesn't mean you suddenly lose your right if it was yours to begin with. If this was your territory and you were forced out without any hostile action being done to the other side, simply you had a foreign army come and conquer it, and every single day, day after day, you prayed to return to the land, which Jews have been doing for thousands of years, for sure you have that right to go back. And again, when the Jews returned there was no great displacement. So when was the displacement? How did that happen? A lot of it was because the Arab army said, we're going to destroy this Jewish state, cannot accept a Jewish state, even though the only prior sovereign state that existed in that land prior to Israel's re-establishment was a Jewish state. The Jewish kingdom 2,000 years ago, which the Romans came in and destroyed and exiled the Jews from. And so the displacement occurred when you had the Arab army saying, largely, leave, we're going to get rid of the Jews, then come back. So many of them just escaped. It was war. And yes, some were displaced during the fighting, but that's because they started a war against the Jews, against Israel. You started a war and then you complain that you lost it. And this other point that Golda Meir makes that's so important, she said there's all these Arab states with so much land, and yet they want to have another Arab state in this tiny sliver of land, which the Jews have a far stronger claim to. Arabs are not indigenous to Judea and Samaria. The Jews are indigenous to Judea. And we've always been happy. Israel, the Jews have always been happy to have Arabs and non-Jews live alongside Israel. The proof of which being that 20% of the population in Israel is Arab. And they have Christians living there. It's the most desirable place to be living in the Middle East. But don't expect Israel to say, we can tolerate you if you will our destruction. And I think the saddest part of all is that it's not just this presenter who's clearly fell for the lies that's interviewing Golda Meir, but the sad thing is so many Jews, so many supporters of Israel have at the back of their heads that sense of guilt, that sense in which they kind of are a bit intimidated by these arguments leveled against Israel, by these accusations leveled against Israel. I did an interview with Rabbi Manis Friedman a few months ago, and we spoke about a quote in the Kabbalah, in the Zohar, that says that no exile will be as oppressive as the last exile, the last sort of stage of Jewish history, referred to as the Ishmaelite exile, because the quarrel that we're facing with the Arabs is that they are descendants of Ishmael. And he said, I said to him, no exile will be as oppressive, no. And by the way, exile doesn't always just mean physical exile. It could also just mean spiritual exile, the pain and suffering that we'd experience. But I said to him, nothing is going to be more oppressive. I mean, look at Jewish history. It's going to be worse than the Holocaust. What should we be bracing ourselves for? And he said, what it means is the psychological impact. The way in which they have made us question ourselves is unprecedented. In prior times, they oppressed us. We knew who we were. They kicked us out of our land, but it's our land. They tried to destroy our belief in God, but we have our belief in God. Today, they're convincing us, and some actually a bit intimidated or believe it a bit, that we are in fact guilty of all these terrible accusations that they throw, making us question our own right to the land, our own right to fight in a just war of survival. But what about the Palestinians? What about the Arabs? Why don't you care for that? Israel has shown more care and concern for protecting innocent civilians than any other army has. Don't say that you don't know that. Don't act like that's not true. And yet they still throw their toys out the pram, and we get intimidated by it. As Golda Meir said, our quarrel is not a quarrel over land. This is about an ideology. And that's really the point. The point is that for as long as we keep indulging in their lies, it's just about protecting these oppressed Palestinians. The oppression that they lament is done by their own leadership and by their own decisions of their leadership. There would be no blockade. There'd be no checkpoints. There'd be no wars had they not always tried to instigate a war to kill the Jews, their leadership. It all comes down to a hateful ideology on their side, and that's always been the case throughout Jewish history. We've always faced those who have been very clever about it, but ultimately at their core, the reason for them attacking the Jews comes from the darkest recesses of human mind and emotion: jealousy, envy, hate. And so what Golda Meir said remains just as true today. And she had the strength of her convictions to say it clearly. And I think it's about time that all of us learn from that strength and that courage to speak the truth plainly to a world that is far too confused. Hi, thank you so much for watching. To watch another one, click here. To stay up to date with all our content, click here to subscribe. And if you're able to, you can help support JTV to grow and grow by clicking join below this video, where you can become a member and get perks including early access to videos and private live discussions with me. But most of all, you'll be partnering with us on our mission to change the world.